Good morning. It's difficult not to be sympathetic with Indian bands in British Columbia who feel that their children have been, quote, stolen, quote, kidnapped from them by the white man's social welfare and quote system. 2,880 in the province of B.C. Yesterday, the Indians, however, led by the Spallumcheen Band, marched in the most unusual foray to the house of the Honourable Grace McCarthy, the Minister of Human Resources. They knocked on the door. They did not get an answer. Not that Grace is unwilling to speak about it, because she plans to be here momentarily, and also in the studio will be two representatives of the Indians of British Columbia. Already here is George Manuel, who is president of the Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs. And on his way is Wayne Christian, who is leader of the Spallumcheen Band, which started this Indian Child Caravan to draw attention to what some of them, many of them apparently feel, is cultural genocide. Cultural genocide carried out by the courts, the welfare workers, and with the tacit consent, I suppose, of the majority population of British Columbia. But first this morning we're going to deal with the question of the Indian Child Caravan, and we're going to deal with it hopefully momentarily through three particular authorities: Grace McCarthy, George Manuel, and, if he makes it, Wayne Christian of the Spallumcheen Indian Child Caravan, after the break. With me now I have the Honourable Grace McCarthy, who's good enough to make it by the skin of her teeth this morning. I only phoned you at what time, about 8:15 or 10 past 8. And here is George Manuel of the Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs. My first question to you, Grace, is, were you home, and why didn't you answer the door when they came to the door yesterday?
Well, I wasn't home. There was no one at home. I was out for dinner, at a family dinner, and I wasn't home, and of course no one can answer the door when there's no one home.
Do you feel it was unfair and a true invasion of your particular weekend domestic privacy for the caravan to come to your house?
Well, unquestionably, I do feel that way, especially since I was not given any notice of their coming. I was not asked to meet with them. And you know, as everyone else that gets to me knows, that if someone asks for an appointment, I will make time to see them, and I was not asked. So from that point of view, I think it was an invasion of privacy.
In a little bit of a rightful snit about that.
Oh, well, there are more things in life to get upset about than that, and so that doesn't upset me too much.
George, perhaps Wayne Christian could answer the question better. Were you out at Gracie's house yesterday?
No, I wasn't, Jack.
In the meantime, however, you fully support the Indian Child Caravan as the president of the Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs.
Yes, I officially went on record supporting. I have to support, and I do support, all bands who are members to the Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs, and the Spallumcheen Band is a member of the Union.
Grace, is there in your view a shred of truth in cultural genocide carried out, quite bluntly, by the white man for sheer convenience sake?
No, I think that's a true exaggeration. The results of Native Indian children being raised in non-Indian homes, unquestionably, if the band itself does not make a great attempt to reach those children, or the children in the band, unquestionably they will take on the non-Indian way of life. Let me just say, though, very clearly, that we do not rush in and apprehend children unless there is a cause.
What causes would there be with Indians different from white children?
Child abuse, child neglect, and the federal government does all social services within the bands. And they are responsible, and they pay for it, and they have their own staff. Our people are only asked to contract for services where the protection of children, and they contract with the provincial government for child protection services, which we provide on contract for the federal government. And remember, we don't make the decision as to where a child will be, when a child will be taken into care. The judge makes, the court makes that decision.
Let me get that quite clear. Are you telling me that even in this day in 1980, the federal government is responsible for delivery of all social services to Indian bands?
On the reserve.
On the reserves. And you are responsible for carrying out the particular protection of children?
That's correct. We have the Protection of Children Act is the responsibility of the provincial government. The federal government purchases the service from the Ministry of Human Resources when it comes to child protection cases. So because of our expertise, our ministry's expertise in that area, they purchase the service.
And you plead not guilty?
Well, certainly we are not guilty of some of the atrocious things that have been said about our ministry. And let me say this, my ministry does not go around picking up children because they're delighted to do so. My ministry has the protection of children under their responsibility. And let me ask, how many television cameras and how many comments and how much would come down on us from the public, including the Native Indians, if we neglected to do our duty in protecting a child in this province?
Wayne Christian, the head of the Indian Child Caravan of the Spallumcheen Band, has just arrived. Wayne, meet Grace McCarthy.
Good morning.
You weren't home yesterday.
You didn't tell me you were coming.
You should have known.
You should have asked me for an appointment. I would have gladly given you one. But you didn't wish that, I don't imagine. I think you wanted the confrontation and you wanted the publicity, and if you had asked for a meeting and had received one, no doubt it would have taken away from all of the publicity which you had wanted to generate. Is that not true?
Possibly. What we want actually now is to meet with you after, if we can, out over here, because there's a lot of people with us, as you understand.
Make your case in front of me too, Wayne, because I said off the top of the program this morning, it's very difficult not to be sympathetic with the Indian cause when children are removed and put into white foster homes, of which we now have, how many, roughly speaking? 2,880, it said?
Approximately 39% of the children that are taken into care are Native Indian children. Of those 39%, 30% are in Indian homes. The rest we do not have Indian homes for. We have pleaded with the Native Indian councils and band councils and associations, and they have not provided us with more. We continue to work towards that goal, and we hope we can have that goal reached, where it will be 100%.
What do you want Grace McCarthy to do? She explained to me just now that the federal government, nobody's denying a problem admits, but what do you want her to do, the minister to do?
Okay, what we're explaining, in terms of the court case that we're bringing before the courts the next couple of weeks, is that we want jurisdiction in our laws that we have in our community. Like what you're saying is that your department has protection of children under Bill 45 now, if I'm correct. And what we're saying under our Indian government laws that we have in our community is we want that jurisdiction. We want control of those dollars that you're receiving from Indian Affairs. That's what we're saying. We want those resources in our community so we can make the foster parent payments, so that we can develop our own child care programs, so we can hire and have our own group homes and those types of things. That's what we're saying. It's pretty simple in my mind. And what you're saying is that as a province, you provide a service, because that's your jurisdiction under the Constitution. And what we're saying in the Constitution, we're saying we have powers there, that as an Indian band and as an Indian government, that we want that legislation recognized.
Are you being practical, though? Is he being practical at all?
Well, we have a problem here, and the problem is not that we do not wish to have independence within the Native Indian people, nor, in fact, we would applaud that. We would want them to have independence, but we also have this problem, that if there is any child that is neglected and known to be neglected or abused in this province, we have a constitutional necessity to have the protection of children under the provincial government. Now, you speak, Chief Christian, of the court case, and I can't reflect on that court case, Jack. That is a forthcoming court case. It is not over. It is
Was there
still
not a
before
court
us.
case before, though, which made a point about the custody of Indian children in non-Indian homes?
That was a Supreme Court case which was about the adoption of children, and would the native child retain native Indian rights after adoption, and the court ruled yes it would, and what comes first is actually the native Indian rights, and then the adoption, they retain the rights.
I'm grateful for my panel, hastily drawn together at the last moment. We'll give Wayne and George Manuel and Grace McCarthy a moment to get back, and you can make the strongest points you wish after the break.
Okay.
Wayne Christian and George Manuel from Spallumcheen in the Union, and Grace McCarthy.
There's three things I would like to clarify. There is definitely, one of the fundamental problems here is that there is a cultural clash between the way the provincial government administers the child care and the values of Indian people. Just to specifically cite an example, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, a group of children was apprehended in Fort Ware, and the purpose of the apprehension was that the grandparents who normally looks after the children were supposed to not have food in the house. And it was luckily our lawyer happened to be in the area. And this has been the real problem, and that is Indians generally in Indian communities cannot speak for themselves. There's usually not a representative around to speak for them. And in this case, our lawyer was there and went to the old lady, and the old lady showed them all the food that was in the house. And this was Indian food, and Indian food is the very basis under which the nourishment is acquired by Indian people, and this is the one cultural clash. The other big problem that we're of course faced with is the other. We have a data from the Association of American Corporate Affairs in the United States, in which a great number of Indian people are being adopted in the Canadian Indian people are being adopted in the United States. In 1975 alone, there was 300 Indians adopted into American Indian homes in the state of
BC.
Well,
Not from BC.
From BC as well.
Are you aware of that second point at all, Grace?
No, I'm certainly not aware of that.
I can't imagine a BC court adopting a foster child into an American home across the border. There'd be an instant outcry.
This was submitted before the Committee on Immigration and Foreign Affairs in the United States.
Second.
This is where we
I want to give everybody a fair chance. Do you want to touch this case of Fort Ware, which is some story?
Yes, I do, because it's the one case that the group has been talking about all weekend, and let me just make it very clear.
This is where the dried moose meat was regarded as rags, allegedly by some social worker.
Now, on those grounds alone, on the grounds of the children not having sufficient to eat, they would not be apprehended. They may be apprehended, but they certainly wouldn't be committed to another home. They would not be taken away from their natural parents. First of all, we don't make that judgment. The judge makes, the court makes that judgment. And the court would find out what reasonable grounds there would be to apprehend and to keep the child.
Was there a judge in that case?
No, there wasn't a judge. The problem was resolved before it went before the judge. But we have another serious problem, and that is.
In other words, food was supplied. If it was decided that there was enough food. But let me I want to get to this cultural genocide point. 20 years ago, when housing in Indian reserves was very bad, for a variety of reasons. Blame the white culture, whatever, blame anybody you like. Do you suggest that there is, in fact, and I don't want to bully you, that there has been any kind of deliberate cultural genocide, Wayne, or is it just
Well, if you analyze it and look at it quite honestly, like in our community, we're a little over 300 strong, and we have had 100 children taken from our community, and that's 30% of our population.
over how long?
Okay, from 1951 to 1961, we had 70 children taken, or one generation, and we're suffering because of that now.
Why were they taken?
I have no idea. In a lot of cases, okay, like for instance, my mother, she had us taken away from her, and I still have not been able to find out why. Because in my mind, we were doing okay. Like
How old were you then?
I was only 12 years old at the time.
Where were you put?
In white foster homes around the area.
Well, we can't speak about your specific case, but broadly speaking, when 100 children are taken away from one band, in how many years?
It's 51 been a 30-year period.
What do you think the reasons were?
I think a lot of the reasons in terms of there's a lot of difference in values, because a lot of the children were taken when they were being taken care of by the grandparents, when our parents are away working in the orchards.
Without talking about the Spallumcheen Band, can you give me the broad reason over all provincial administration, yours and previous ones, why these children would have been taken into care?
Because for their own protection. Let me make it very clear. Our ministry does not go around taking children out of anybody's home because it's lots of fun. It's one of the most traumatic experiences for a member of our ministry to do.
What would it be? Neglect?
It would be neglect, it would be abuse, it would be a child that would be so endangered that that child would be close to death or whatever. There are so many reasons, and those reasons are very clear in our
We would like
ministry.
to do a study in relation to the cultural conflict between Indians and non-Indians, and we have never been given an opportunity. The federal government has made representations to the provincial government to allow Indian people to get involved as third parties into anything that has to do with Indian affairs, and the provincial government has refused the involvement of the Indian people. I myself has been fully involved in trying to negotiate this involvement, and we haven't. The provincial government's position on this is that yes, Mr. Manuel, we let you get involved after the block funding is agreed upon by us.
You know, Mr. Manuel, this is not true. We have not only had a cooperation, but it is demonstrated in the Stony Creek Indian Band example, where 2 children from one family were taken from the family for their own protection. We worked with the community, the Native Indian Band, our own people of the Ministry of Human Resources, and we've been able to return those children in the past year to their own natural parents.
The problem
Let's
with
go
that-
back to Wayne again, though. How old are you, Wayne?
26.
Do you
I just want to, just in terms of that Stony Creek example that the minister was just reciting, and wouldn't you agree that the authority for that committee lies with your ministry and not with the community?
The authority it only lies within as much initiative that the band itself would like to take, and,
But wouldn't you
we've been
also
cooperating
agree
with the
that
band in that regard.
that committee, if you withdrew from that committee, that committee would be inoperational?
But you're going to lose the listeners on these technicalities. I mean, that means nothing to the people out there, Indian and non-Indian, who are watching. Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Is the state of your band now such, and other Indian bands in British Columbia, that in your opinion, you can cope with all domestic emergencies, and that you can care for children who have been neglected, abused, or and it happens in white communities too. We've got lots of neglect, abuse, alcoholism, and brutality. That also happens in Indians. Can you now care for these children within your own housing and facilities?
Yes, we can care for them. Like, we've got families that are taking a lot of children, for instance. Like, we've got one family that has 7 foster children alone. And
with the approval of Gracie's ministry, I presume?
well, some of them we do on our own. And it's really evident that this is one of the problems we really do have, is housing. But this year, we're putting into our community 13 units that we can pick up some of the slack.
Well, you would cooperate with that, wouldn't you, obviously?
We have said right along that we would like to cooperate, and we would like to have that.
Jack, the real problem here is the authority. You know, I mean, if the Human Resources Department of the Madam Minister, or her government, I should say, her government, along with the federal government, agreed to cooperate to support the Indian families, to support the governing authorities in the community, we could handle that problem with no problem at all.
After the break, we'll do one short segment. Wayne Christian, Spallumcheen, George Manuel, Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs, Grace McCarthy, Minister of Human Resources. Is this really a political move? Looking at the bad old days, and now that things are improving, are you on a straight militant political kick?
Militant? No.
It's
Political,
not-
maybe.
What kind of politics? I mean, I'm not asking you for the name of a party. What do you want specifically Grace McCarthy to do, if she could do, when she tells me that it's the federal government that supplies the services and she does care and protection of children? What do you want?
What we're really saying is it's not only the politics of the thing, it's the reality of the thing, is that we want the responsibility for our children, and it's pretty simple. You know, you can interpret that as politics,
Why
but
didn't
also...
you? Why didn't you put these Indian children, 2,880 at the moment, into Indian homes?
Because there weren't native Indian homes accepting these children, and there's the problem. If we had, if our white homes who have taken these children in had not opened up their hearts to these children, we would have been discriminating against the Indians. That would have been the charge. You can't have it both ways. If you want to have native Indian children protected and taken away from places where they are at danger, then provide us with the native Indian homes, and we would be delighted to have them. We've asked for that. We also have said that we will cooperate fully in any way that we can to make the opportunity and the chance for the native Indian child as good as it possibly can be in this province. And we want to work with the native Indian bands. We have offered that. We've offered it, and we have had that acceptance, and it has worked in the Stony Creek Band example. It has worked.
And the Stony Creek example is a poor example because the employees there are directly responsible to the Ministry of Human Resources. But we're missing the point here altogether.
So am I.
The point is really there is no services, no provisions either from the federal government or the provincial government to help the families who are faced with these problems. And we're trying to focus the attention on, we're trying to strengthen our identity, our cultural identity as a nation of people. Mm-hmm. And the only way that you can accomplish this kind of goal is by strengthening the family, and we know that. And so there is no services provided, maybe under the new act, but certainly not in the past. There's no the provision, no resources to help it. It's just simply straightforward to apprehend the children when there is some kind of abuse or some kind of neglect, which is neglect to the non-Indian is very different than ours. For instance, putting an Indian child in a grandparent's home to us is neglect, and sometimes that's looked upon it by a social worker at the field level as neglect.
Wayne, have your say.
You know, I feel what George is saying is quite true, because like just quite recently in the past in our community, we could not get services from Human Resources. I think at the time Bill Vander Zalm was the minister, and he made a statement, I think it was October '78, that they would provide no services to Indian communities. And all the service that they do provide is the apprehension route, and that's all that they provide, period.
Grace?
Well, it is not a provincial government edict. It is a federal government program. The federal government provides social services on the Indian reserves. The only time that we're called in to assist is in the protection of children. And then we only assist. The judge makes that decision. I would like to say that we are often called in by the Indian families themselves. It is not always because it is someone who is from the non-Indian community that says an Indian child is being neglected or abused. We are called in by the Indian families themselves because they know there is a child being neglected and they want the protection for that child.
Wayne, what do you say to that?
I think in the case like our community, if we start developing and having our own people working in our community, they can come see us, but they have no other alternative, because like what you're saying is that child care rests with your ministry. And you're saying the federal government has responsibility through social services, but they transfer all of that to you in terms of the transfer payments. Would you not agree?
Well, in terms of where we are going to, if we place a child, we pay for that child through the transfer payments. We pay for that child in that child's home, whether it be a non-Indian or an Indian home. It makes no difference.
And there's no involvement of Indian people during the negotiations for those resources between the federal government and I've made every effort to
let me tell you that there can be as much involvement as you wish, and I
only after the fact, though, and your ministry or your officials in meeting with your predecessor, in meeting with the officials, they've said no involvement until after we've negotiated and come to an agreement with the federal government on the kind of monies that we get.
We're losing this on question of transfer payments. Is there any easy answer, Wayne Christian? You brought this band down, you've succeeded in your purpose quite properly of focusing on the number of Indian children in non-Indian homes. It's conceded that for a long while there weren't any Indian homes for some of these children, and they had to be put in non-Indian homes? Are we all agreed on that?
I would like
At one time?
I would like to ask these gentlemen, are they prepared to help us in an aggressive way, as aggressive as they've been in this campaign this weekend? Are they aggressively going to assist us in getting more Native Indian homes for these children? Would
Well,
they
my
offer
response
that?
to that, would you be prepared to help us? You know, we have our
Yes.
goals. This is where our conflict is. This is where your government refuses to cooperate with us. Would you be prepared, your department be prepared to cooperate with us within the framework of our goal to develop self-determination on Indian reservations by helping us to provide services to our Indian governments rather than taking the children away from their families, and also strengthening the families within the Indian communities through the terms of reference set down by the Band Council?
Well, I have no idea what your terms of reference are, but what I would offer is the same kind of cooperation that we have offered before, and we'd be pleased to offer that, and we'd be pleased to work with you, and we have said that before.
Are you prepared to take the $10 million your budget for this kind of thing and give it to the Indian bands to spend?
Oh, I couldn't make a blanket statement like that, and I'll tell you why. The Indian bands, and we all know, have had millions upon millions of dollars spent on them through the federal government, and they have not been able to have
Has much of that been wasted, that federal money?
Well,
Has it been badly spent?
you, Jack, yourself said before we started the program that there has been a tremendous progress in the past 10 years of Indian
Past
people.
25 years.
25 years, okay. I think the resources that the minister is talking about is related to that progress and development, and we want to continue to escalate that kind of development that we're talking about.
Last word from Wayne Christian, who led the band and who achieved this spotlight on the problem which I think whites of all political partisan shape and size and Indians appreciate. Do you feel you've made any progress?
I think we've made progress, but like I'm going to say is that I think that it's time we left those problems behind and worked towards the future. Like that's what you're saying, we work
Yes,
together.
that's right.
But what I'm saying with that is that $10 million, like I say, we want our share of that because we want to develop our own programs. And what I'm saying to everybody else is that, you know, I think in my mind, what we're trying to do is rebuild the family. And that was the whole intent. Our family was destroyed in the past.
But can you blame the white man totally for all of this mess?
Well, Jack, before
Yes, I know.
I'm asking the second generation, the young fella. Can you blame the white man totally?
I would say yes. I would really say yes, because in my experience with just my people and what they've gone through, and in terms of the dependency that's been created, like you said, they spend millions of dollars on our people. But a lot of that was spent in Indian affairs and the bureaucracy. So in my mind, it's time that we took control of those types of resources and rebuild our own communities.
You can only do that democratically in our society, though, can't you? After negotiation and patient planning and talking to your federal government and getting your rights within the federal constitution, which is going to be thrust down our throats.
I don't know if Pierre Trudeau is an example of a democracy. I don't know if we can do anything.
Grace McCarthy, thank you for coming here this morning. Perhaps you can, at least you've met now. First time you've met
I'm
Wayne.
very pleased that we've had the opportunity.
You've met George before. I've done my best to try and stay in the middle and make it a little clearer. I'm grateful.
well, you did a good job, Jack,
Yeah.
and thank you.
My thanks to everyone involved. I'll be back after the break.
Okay.